All right, welcome to the AMAI, where we talk about AI stuff every morning. Today we have our first guest, Shawn Cutter. Shawn, why don't you introduce yourself for a second?
Shawn Cutter. I'm a sixth generation farmer from Ohio. I also grew up in oil and gas, but I'm a total nerd and I solve problems with technology. So that's what I do. I'm working on fixing our food system. Farming and food is what I work on.
That is
Applying
awesome.
technology to do that.
Are you in Ohio right now?
No, I'm in Tampa.
Okay, you moved down to Tampa.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been
Cool.
here since 2005, so I
Okay,
consider myself a Florida native at this point.
nice. I like it. I like it. That
Well,
is awesome.
so Shawn, there is no structured format for this meeting. Sometimes we have quality conversations, and sometimes we just don't. But typically we do filming like 2 or 3 days a week, and then we do editing
Mhm.
1 day a week where we publish everything. So like we filmed yesterday, and tomorrow or Thursday we'll end up publishing all this, today's and yesterday's content. So
Mhm.
we normally talk about AI news, and yesterday we splunked all over the place, and sometimes other tech news gets in the way, like the Hey calendar that I just sent to Justin this yesterday and said, "Hey, did you see this?" And Justin, as a UX nerd, is getting ready, I think, to explode about how cool it is. So
Yeah.
go ahead. We can
So
take
real quick, so I can catch up. Hey Calendar, is this the same thing as Hey, the email service?
Yes,
They're
same
doing
company.
calendaring. Okay,
Actually, Justin,
I tried that back in the day.
you could share the your screen. Let me make sure you can share your screen. You can share your screen if you want to show anything off, and then talk about some of the neat things about Hey.
Well, I haven't even like downloaded it yet, right? I've only watched the video, so I don't really know that I have a ton to share to show. But but the cool thing about Hey Calendar is a few things that stand out about it, right? Um, I have long thought about calendars that the problem with calendars, or I shouldn't say the problem with calendars, but like the missed opportunity with calendars is that there's a lot more that happens that is scheduled that doesn't revolve around the calendar, primarily my to-do list, which I write a to-do list out by hand and I assign days and times to to-dos. So I can kind of mentally stack up my week in order to make sure that I don't get to Friday and I'm like, well, fuck, now I've got 15 things that I have to do on Friday and it just blew out my day, right? And so I kind of like try to load balance my to-dos across the week by using time and day slots like a calendar. And that is not something that's ever been integrated with a calendar until I've never seen it, at least until Hey Calendar. There may be some others that do it, and it does it in an extremely good and flexible way. And the other thing that I think is super important is that the nuance that Hey Calendar understands, and this is so critical from a user experience standpoint and understanding how humans actually experience time and tasks, is that there is a level of fuzziness built into the calendar by default that really represents how life actually works, right? Like, so for me, when I make a to-do list, I'll make a to-do list on Monday mornings. I spend like an hour kind of planning my week and I'll write down everything that I think I need to do and I'll kind of assign it to days. And then as I go through each day, I'll assign those tasks to certain times of the day. Well, my days aren't that predictable. Obviously, things come up, last minute meetings pop up, other things happen, right? So things shift around. Traditional calendars aren't very flexible in that regard, right? They kind of now like I've missed that thing and I've got to redo it and it's very rigid, right? And so what's cool about Hey Calendar is there's this amount of slack and flex in it where I can just put something as like a binary yes no on a day. Did I do it at some point? I could put a group of things that are like, here are things I want to do sometime this week, right? And if I don't get it done this week, it'll just follow on to next week. They also have the concept of a maybe event, which is I'm going to try to do this between this hour and this hour, but I might or might not do it, right? And so what I love about how they've put the calendar together, in addition to a lot of other little flourishes like being able to name days custom and circle important events and other things like that, what I really like about what they've done is they've leaned into the messiness that is real life. And they, instead of trying to take the messiness out and try to structure the messiness to work for you, they've said, you know what? There's just some messiness and slack. Let's let people live in that kind of messy area, but give them a tool to better see that and still work around it. And I think that's where the flexibility comes in. I think that's why it's so interesting to me.
I love it. It reminds me a little bit of Our Stack. I pasted the link in there. I've been searching for a tool that fits, and I have yet to find one that I can use day in and day out. As my life and kind of career, professional life has changed in multiple organizations, anytime you work across multiple organizations, the traditional calendar gets completely blown up. It just doesn't work because it's not connected in the right way. You have different email and calendar, and blend your personal life into it. There's just no solution out there that does it. And like you, I like being able to use my calendar, kind of break out the things that I have to get done, including tasks, to-do items, being able to set those at a certain point. Our Stack, it fell short because you have to do that across the board. I like this because of what you described as the messiness. Our Stack doesn't really do a good job at that.
Well, I'll say there's a couple things I really like about this that I just want to call out real quick. So as you can see on the screen that I'm sharing, they have this idea of these icons that you can attach to days. And these are fantastic. So the idea of like, hey, I want to set a goal to exercise 15 minutes a day. So I set this icon there that's visible to me. And I only click it that I've completed it after I've done it. And it creates and I'm not going to go through the whole video, so I won't find it, but it creates this tracking, this habit tracking calendar that's specific. So you can track to see how many days in a row you've done. And so you have this habit tracking calendar built into your core calendar. The other concepts that Justin alluded to is the fact that you can name specific days at the top of the day. So that way, instead of just having it cover your whole day, like a lot of calendars do, it actually just comes up and says, hey, this is a travel day. And you see it there, but it doesn't necessarily cover that. And then the fact that there's all these items that you can drag into a particular day. But I think there are two little additional flourishes that are really nice. One, it's this idea of like highlighting things that are important to you. And then there's this, what you see here, which is a time tracker. And one of the things he says during the video is calendars presume everything is in the future. And Hey presumes nothing, essentially. And that is, if you need to track time that you've done something, you can put it on your calendar when you did it. And then it pulls up a time tracking system. And so instead of this like weird hodgepodge of, hey, I have my calendar for future to-dos, I have a time tracking tool for what I've done and what I want to bill. And then I have like, no, it just combined, and then I have a habit tracking. It's combined all of those in a very neat way and then added some to-dos to it. However, one of the things you can't see, and I think is actually the most important change of all UX in calendars, is I frequently talk about the interaction cost of dealing with websites. And all calendar systems require you to click to jump to the next month, right? And so everyone's used to that pattern. Well, you can see here a little bit, this pattern dies here. You literally scroll up and down a page and it's week after week after week. There's very low interaction cost of switching weeks here. It's a very neat pattern.
Yeah.
It's very fluid.
It's very, very, very fluid. Yeah. So you can see they're scrolling at this point in the video. So I'm going to see if I can find the habit tracking real quick. And then we can start talking about AI.
Yeah, if you're interested in Hey Calendar, we'll find a referral code. We'll drop it in the YouTube description below. Find that referral code and use that when you sign up.
I don't know if Basecamp does referral codes, but we'll find out.
Did either of you try out the email service? Hey, email?
I didn't. I know a lot of people that did, and they liked it. And I know some people who didn't. The people who are super email, this is going to sound so stupid because I just said super. The people who are super email users, I'll switch to superhuman, I think.
Okay.
because that seems to be the predominant best email client.
I'm still stuck on Outlook. I don't like it, but I haven't found anything that does it. And I hate email, and I use hate because it's a strong word, and that's why I chose it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
I still roll stock Gmail in the browser. That's my email experience.
as far as I know, everyone that I know that has shifted away from Outlook or Gmail is on Superhuman, because of the keyboard commands and being able to get to inbox 0 every day, which is essentially impossible in any other tool. So here's an example of like, hey, you can see the track time and how it gets added up. So it's actually really nice for anybody who has to track their time from a billing perspective, that it actually is part of your base calendar. All right. I think that is it for the hay stuff.
Yeah, it's good stuff. It's good stuff. So Shawn, tell us a little bit about what you're doing in like farming and food and that kind of thing. You said 6th generation farmer. I presume you were the first one to defect from Ohio in 6 generations. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
From immediate family.
Yeah. So decided to come down here to the world's most wonderful city, Tampa, Florida. Yeah, talk to us about what you're doing in food and all that, and how you're thinking about AI with regards to how AI can help out with the food situation in the country.
Well, let's start first with the fact that every single farmer on the planet has to change what they're doing. And change is extremely hard for farmers, right? We've all heard that the effort and the toil of farm life, and all of that's true. But with climate change, for instance, in Ohio, where I'm from, the family farm, which my younger brother still farms, we've had 6 droughts in the last 10 years. I had 1 drought in my entire childhood.
Wow.
So areas of the country that didn't need irrigation are going to need irrigation. Adapting to different farming practices, so we're not so extractive, where we're just going to keep putting chemicals on the ground, right? Instead of planting the right crops at the right time, you can eliminate a lot of those costs. So we've done it the hard way, doing it on our farm. We took over the farm in 2010 when my dad passed. So we kind of had to learn everything, and we've gradually transitioned. We just transitioned the farm to regenerative practices, organic certification this year. So what I'm building is a system and a platform to help all farmers do that, transition what they're doing. How do you contextualize the farm, digitize it, use the tools that are out there that many other industries enjoy? Farmers don't have these tools. They don't have digital tools. They have to keep everything up in their head. The reason they get up in the morning and look at the weather is because they're trying to plan their day, because it's completely new and it will change depending on that weather. We want to give farmers a plan and tools that when they need to make adjustments to that plan, it does it for them, right? It helps them do it. The farmer knows their land, but they don't know how to adapt it to their farm to something brand new. We grew hemp for the first time in 2020. We're a traditional row crop, corn and soybeans, and it's a completely different new mindset. There's new inputs, there's new everything. And that's what it's like for a farmer trying to transition. You're going to lose the farm. It's just not possible. If the family had other businesses, oil and gas, trucking, construction, we wouldn't have been able to do it.
Because the cost, all of the costs involved in kind of switching over to that new crop, right? You're growing hemp. How do you grow it? How do you plant it? What are the watering and fertilization requirements? All of that. Like, we have to learn all of that, reconfigure the land to support it, reconfigure the operations to support it. And that's a lot of overhead. I presume.
Oh, it's you can't imagine, and it will risk the farm. If you're transitioning a farm, it takes 3 years of not getting receiving organic pricing, so higher prices. So you're selling at a lower cost, you're producing less during that transition.
Yep.
So that's it's just not possible. But it's not just the technology. The farmers are more or less on an island. So what we did in Ohio is partner with Ohio State. We conducted joint research on hemp. So we brought in the experts, collaborated. Normal farmers don't do that. You know, I'm a nerd. I see, oh, well, we got this research center right there. We can work with that. Doesn't normally happen. And so can we, while a farmer is using this tool day to day, you know, they have their phone. How do they get access to new methods? How do they get access to the experts? We need a platform to connect that community of farmers, so farmers can help farmers, but farmers can also tap in to the experts and the research. And I'm going to tie this to AI here. What we're using AI for is to do that active translation, right? To how do you source the latest plant science, latest information from researchers, and translate that to farmers and apply it to their farm. It doesn't do any good for me to learn how to grow the best tomato if all of the characteristics of that study was in Southern California.
It's like fitting. It's like fitting it to the yeah.
And that's really hard for people to do, or it's hard, it's time consuming, but for AI, for large language models. Well, okay, so it takes about 30 seconds or 40 seconds. It's not
a slow snap.
So
we're waiting, and there's another sentence. Yeah, but all of the pieces are there. And
so
yep.
So would you say that one of the things you're trying to do when you're building the platform is essentially create like a co-op for the small farmers, right? Because I think what a lot of people might not know is that the big farming giants control a massive portion of the distribution, and they have economies of scale that are impossible for small farmers to have, right? Are you trying to essentially provide economies of scale for small farmers by creating something like an Ace Hardware for farming through the platform?
I would characterize it like that. But our go-to-market is to focus on the larger enterprise farms. We're working with a very old family farm operation in Louisiana, 120,000 acres. So it's a big operation, but their 10,000 acres of sugarcane, it's so old school. They don't have the tools. They don't have any sort of digital landscape to assess what's in that field before they harvest. They actually won't know what they harvest for 6 more months. How do you make decisions like that?
Right.
I mean, every conversation I have obviously is around AI and data, right? And I think yesterday we talked a lot about data. But it's so crazy having worked in tech for so long where you expect to know like milliseconds worth of data to think about having no data for 6 months at a time. That just would boggle my mind. Ironically, I went to Hawaii for my honeymoon like 13, 14 years ago. And they talked about they essentially stopped producing sugarcane in Hawaii because it was too expensive to ship to the mainland. And that most of the sugarcane that we get in the US is actually from South America now because it's cheaper to get lower quality. So now they've started to shift very similar to what you're talking about. Now they produce the sugarcane, but they use it to produce alcohol on the island because the alcohol can justify the cost of shipping back to the mainland that the sugarcane itself cannot. So
yeah, Brazil is using a massive amount of its millions and millions of acres that it grows of cane for producing energy for the country. So that is what they're doing there.
Wow. So what are the so when a farmer's using the platform that you're working on, like what is the output of the AI? Like, talk about, like, let's get into the details a little bit. Like, how are you using LLMs to help with this? What are you sending? What are you getting back? Like, what is let's kind of get into the weeds a little bit
Well, let's maybe I think it would be a
without
good.
exposing any trade secrets,
Oh,
obviously.
I could expose and describe everything about it, and I don't think that that would help anyone
Yeah.
all that much build it, come up with it. But we have learned and uncovered some interesting uh, uh, user interaction patterns with the platform. And the biggest thing was farmers need their hands. They have to have their hands.
Ah.
So you can't be like the farmers not, they can't do this all the time, right? They got to carry a bucket, a shovel, a pitchfork. And so you have to think about, and this was like the eye opener, we have to make this voice first.
Yeah.
Like the entire thing has to be voice first. So a farmer can put it, Doc is our AI, Egg MD is the platform, Egg MD doctor. So the farmer puts it into listen mode, and they can go about their business. They can start recording the humidity, and they're just voicing it and dictating it. It's capturing that information, using NLP to extract the key entity detection, numeric values, and allow the farmer to review it. So they can go through their day, they can do their inspections, and now there's more of a review process. So they're not spending as much effort doing the input. They're spending more time reviewing and ensuring data quality. And that way, anything that's surfaced by the AI that might be problematic comes back to the farmer. So we're always keeping the farmer in the loop, making decisions. The platform is never going to execute a command without the farmer saying to do it. And by doing that, the system can learn what works and what doesn't. It's also making predictions on what will and what won't work. Farmers still can do it, but it's going to improve every time a farmer uses it, every recommendation. It's no different. Like, this is how you build a learning system. Connect it to a graph, connect the front end to the back end, to the predictions, and that system can learn over that graph.
I love it. I think Justin's probably heard me say it 100 times, but one of the big things I talk about in my consulting practice is the idea of editing and not authoring. And as you grow, if you want to grow your career, you need to get to a point where you can train your team to help come up with ideas instead of always bringing issues to you and making you think about it. And so you're essentially, and I've said this a lot, is that AI enables everyone to edit instead of author. And so you're allowing the AI to author everything and then allowing them to review it before it gets published, so to speak. And so that process, I think, is going to be really enabling.
I think one of the things you were interested that was also really interesting, Shawn, that you were talking about, like a couple things. One, when we design products, one of the things that is a very famous saying that a number of folks like Steve Blank and others have talked about, Paul Graham, is that when you design products, you got to get out of the fucking building and go watch people use it, right? And what you just said, I'm walking around a field, I'm carrying a shovel, I'm carrying a bucket, I'm climbing up on a tractor. Don't come to me with a complex UI on a fucking iPhone. I know you made it simple, but I don't have two hands to hold this thing with, right? Like, I literally have a bucket and a shovel in my hand. And I love that because it's a reminder that when we build technology, you have to build technology to work how the people work. You can't just assume that everybody sits at a desk 9 to 5 and scrolls, doom scrolls on their phone with their thumb, right? Like, that's not how technology is used. And what's interesting about like one way that you're using AI, and that I think is really fascinating, because a lot of times we talk about AI as, Chris and I talk about AI a lot around generative, about how AI is so good at generating new things, author don't, or edit don't author, et cetera, right? To get away from the blank page problem. But one of the things you're also using AI for, which is like a sneaky use that a lot of people don't think of, an enablement use, which is just allowing people to talk better and give better instructions in a voice-only environment where it can be more accurately understood. The instruction can be more accurately conveyed, if you will, which makes for a more usable experience of the product. Whereas kind of before, hey, look, there's my balloons. Whereas before, we had things like NLP. We had that kind of technology, before a year ago. It wasn't near as good as it is now paired with an LLM. So it's interesting in one way that you're using it is like this enablement technology in order to make the product work better in the environment that it's sitting in. I think that's a really interesting use.
Yeah.
Yeah, LLMs really allowed us to adapt to the persona. NLP has always been there, but in order to do that, you had to build it. You actually had to adapt and build those models for every single one. So when OpenAI came out with that it made everything that we're doing probably a factor of 3 to 4 improvement of the effort that it's going to take in order to deliver. I have this very complicated plant science, translate it to farmer speak so they understand it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I love that. And
in real time.
Yeah, that it blows me away. And I really wish I was working on a big project now with it. I've implemented some fun things, and we just helped launch a SaaS with that very heavily uses it. But when I was working and building software for the hotel space, to Justin's point, get out of the office, right? We were shadowing some housekeepers, and by the way, like they work with their hands, and they work hard, and they work heavy. And so, and the way to build software that was very not intrusive and they could use very quickly, that didn't add to the time that they had in the room. Because if you don't know, there's a massive shortage of housekeepers, and this was pre-COVID. It only got worse after COVID. Well, what I didn't appreciate was that housekeepers speak lots of different languages because they tend to come from different socioeconomic backgrounds, right? Lots of different languages. Went to one hotel, and the housekeeping manager spoke like 3 different languages, which I thought was really cool. His staff spoke 7 different languages, and by the way, 2 of the people spoke a language that no one else in the building spoke. And so when you think about like designing software for that, we were like, oh, we need to go very heavy on iconography and very heavy on things that don't have to be translated. Because if somebody was trying to help, it's not that we couldn't translate it, right? It's not like we couldn't translate the app, but they wouldn't be able to help each other because no one else in the building spoke the same language, which was just mind boggling. And now you start to talk about AI, and it's like, well, it would be even better if we just let them dictate while they were walking around, right? Instead of having to open up the screen. And even if it was 15 seconds, that's 15 seconds they could have been physically working. And so I do think text and speech in particular is one of the big parts of an enabled UI via AI, if that makes sense. And so, yeah, I think that's a great commentary.
One thing I want to touch on, Justin, we're both talking about watching the user, observing. One of the best decisions I made on my first company, we did real-time oil and gas operations. So give the people out in the field a tablet or a phone they can collect digitally, connecting it to the cloud, but also the meters, sensors, equipment so they can get real-time alerts. And I would send all my engineers, every one of them had to spend time with the pumpers in the field, the oil field techs that we could drive around to the wells. So every new customer that we brought on, we negotiated, hey, I send all my engineers out. Can I send some of them out for training? The best feature development took place from that observation of an engineer riding with a pumper. And even the dialogue with the pumper is one pumper, he was like 350 pounds. He was a big guy. His hands, every finger was like a huge sausage, right? And he's like, can't you just give me a spot on that screen and I can just move my thumb without like bumping into the buttons? Like, sure. That became the feature that was like the go-to demo feature that everyone was like, oh, that totally makes sense. And we could tell that story. And that feature probably closed a half a dozen deals, just because the engineer was out in the field with the pumper, experienced the problem, and they're coming up with ideas.
I love that. I mean, absolutely. I worked on a project a few years ago for wind turbine technicians, right? Guys who were up 300 feet in the air in the nacelle of a wind turbine fixing engines, right? This is a highly dangerous, highly specialized job, right? And you're in an environment that is extraordinarily harsh. You're in this nacelle full of equipment, crouching around. It's loud as hell. The thing is moving like this in the wind, right? I mean, it's a very chaotic environment. And so we were doing a kind of emergent knowledge sharing thing where we were trying to capture tribal knowledge between techs and then make it more available to everybody, so that if you've been a senior tech for 20 years and although the manual doesn't say you need to pull this panel back before you take these two bolts off, or else you're going to spend an extra hour trying to get through here, right? That piece of knowledge needs to be captured and then kind of sent back to the rest of the workforce somehow. And like almost identical to what you were saying, one of the biggest things that we learned from people was, guys, I've got gloves on. I can't just like take my gloves off every time I need to do something on this app. I got to be able to talk to it. I got to be able to use like gestures and things like that. Like being able to like scroll around a screen is just not a workable thing in this environment, you know? And you don't understand that until you stand in a space with somebody and you see them struggle and you go, oh man, this is not a 9-to-5 desk job experience, right? It's very different. You only get that kind of empathy when you get out of the building and into the environment.
I just want to point out, completely accidentally, all three of us have worked on software for maintenance and engineering.
It's such a huge space.
Completely accidentally. And actually, I don't know if you even knew this, Justin, but I was an advisor for that company.
Oh, Thule.
Yeah. So, and yeah, it's very interesting. And that actually leads into, we can transition to a new kind of fun topic, the announcement about Apple Vision Pro. And the reason why I wanted to call that out is we were always really excited about augmented reality's ability to be a knowledge transfer tool from a senior tech who may be retired almost in their ability to work, but sit at a corporate HQ or their own home and actually guide 50 or 100 technicians. And so I don't know if you guys know the company, but there's a company called PTC, and they've been the leader in augmented reality for a long time. And they already have really cool tools where you can walk up with like your goggles or an iPad. And if you check this out, I love this. You walk into a data center with an iPad, and the camera will automatically look through every single server and give you the stats overlaid on each server about the temperature, pieces that are going to break, and all this stuff. And this stuff has been going on for a while now. The difference is, believe it or not, $3,500 is potentially the cheapest for the quality in terms of these industrial headsets that have been around for a long time, have been very expensive and not nearly as good. So I'm personally really excited about the idea of the knowledge transfer, so you can have your senior tech essentially enable all your junior techs. And as we talk about maintenance and engineering, one of the biggest sales pitches we had was, your senior staff is retiring. Now this is a few years old. You're going to have a lot of millennials in your building soon, and they're not going to know how to do shit. And so you need to codify and capture your knowledge now so that you can bring your green people up to speed faster. Well, that was 20 years ago, right? Now we're talking about the idea that your senior staff can literally be there instead of just in the process, codified process. They can be there guiding a new person through something very, very technical if it's their first time. And I'm personally, I'm like stoked and super excited. I'll now let you guys talk about it, because augmented reality is going to change the world, just like AI. And I think that combination is going to blow people away.
I think the combination, as those two things come together, right? And like Shawn, I can imagine in the farming world, when headsets like Vision Pro get to the point where they're very inexpensive and very good, which is coming, obviously, like all technology, right? It all goes to zero. Talk about like what you see the potential uses for in farming for that kind of overlaid, but also custom to where you are in the moment because of the LLM translation. Talk about where you see that being interesting in farming.
So being able to where augmenting human intelligence will on a farm starts with also creating a digital twin of that farm. So anywhere the farmer looks, but the most important thing, rather than having to keep, oh, I got to do this, I got to keep that mental list of all the things that are going wrong or about to go wrong in their head, right? They can just be made aware of the most important things. They can just focus on getting their job done. We started this call talking about calendar and focus and time management. Farmer doesn't have that luxury, right? But that's what it can give them. Oh, give them an alert. You have 45 minutes before you're going to have to leave to get to your kid's game. You're out in the middle of a field. It doesn't have to be just the business recommendations. It's the total awareness so that you can live life better, right? Rather than going from one thing to the next.
Can you just, for someone who hasn't worked in the tech space and in connected buildings or connected spaces, can you explain what a digital twin is? I think I've worked with them. Justin, have you worked with digital twins? Yeah, so we are really weird. But 99.9% of the people in the world have not heard of a digital twin, much less know what it is. So Shawn, do you mind explaining that?
Yeah, create a digital copy, a representation of whatever that thing is. If we wanted to create a digital twin of our bodies, we would have the multitude of sensors that are taking all of the readings from all of your organ systems and reporting that at real time. And that digital twin could be recreated. There could be another Shawn that could be presented to Chris or Justin on a Apple Vision Pro, using the data to create that representation. And we're applying a lot more physics-based models to digital twins so that we can make predictions on that digital version. So imagine being able to iterate. You only get one try in the real world, but you can have many trials and tests going on with a digital twin.
Yeah, it's actually really fascinating. And as I mentioned earlier, PTC, one of the reasons they got into AR is because they're also a leader in IoT. And IoT is a really big enabler of digital twins. IoT stands for Internet of Things, which is connected devices or sensors, as Shawn alluded to. I actually worked with the digital twin project, and they were doing, in early COVID days, they were doing COVID sampling inside of Arena to see how much particulates were in the air and if it was healthy to have any more people in a given section. As well as then bomb modeling for, so like all kinds of really cool things that you can do modeling and testing, as Shawn alluded to, but you can also do things that would kind of like just change your perception of reality. It's like, oh, there are too many people in this room. People are going to get sick. We need to stop letting more people in this room. Things like that would be virtually impossible in the past. And so anyway, I find it all like there's this convergence of IoT, which has been growing, billions and billions of connected devices, because the chips have been getting cheaper, and now AI, and then you add in AR, and I think the combination of those three things is going to just change the world in ways that people can't imagine.
Yeah, well, I mean, because like finally, we get this. I think one of the most interesting things that AI is going to bring about, and LLMs play a really large part in this, and future technologies that are LLM like in what they do, is this idea of mass customization at scale immediately, right? We, mass customization, mass personalization has been a thing that we've talked about for a long time on the web, and we've tried, and has been the province of kind of the web app website world, because we can do that with data to some degree. We can change the website a little bit depending on what you like. We can show you this instead of showing that. We can retarget you and stuff like that, right? Mass personalization. But where that has never been able to cross over is doing things like analyze this room in real time, right? Capture a bunch of data from these sensors and then do this analysis kind of on the fly without me having to have installed a system that was configured to do this one particular task, right? These ad hoc kind of mass customized tasks that before now would have been prohibitively expensive or impossible to do. One thing that when GPTs came out a couple months ago, I built this thing with a GPT that would automatically create postings on eBay if I took a picture of something. So I take a picture of a piece of clothing, it would understand what it was, it would research it, write the description, find competitive pricing, figure out the pricing, put it all into a CSV and export it so that I could then just like import that into eBay, right? And I built that in 30 minutes. That's another example of kind of mass customized software at scale. And I was talking to Chris and I were talking about this. I was talking to other people about this particular thing. And the thing is, if you had come to me before last year and you said, "Can you build that?" I probably would have been like, "No, probably not." Or if I could, it would be years of research and tens of millions of dollars. There's no way it's worth it. I built it in 30 minutes in front of a football game on a couch on a Sunday with a beer, right? That is such an insanely transformational moment when we can build things like that fast, that are so hyper customized to a use case or a particular situation. That's something that I think what's really interesting about it is that's kind of maybe the converse of well, AI is going to eat all the software in the world, so there's not going to be a lot of software, and it's just going to be all kind of converged down into this one little thing. That is maybe the opposite for the other side, which is to say, actually, it's going to be this explosion of niche mass customized platforms because we can now do that. And actually, it might be a Cambrian explosion, the amount of technology we see, not a reduction.
I think you're hitting the nail on the head. That's going to happen. But I want to pose a question maybe on that, because I'm what you just described is similar to some of the GPTs and things that I've described on just how much compression happens of software you would have had to build and how fast you can build. I think this only applies to folks that understand that, for folks that have already built those things.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it's hard to get others to understand the gravity of what we're really eliminating.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Right. It's like, like I'm trying to think of another analogy because I like to, it's helpful, those of us, to your point, that work in technology, we kind of like have a kind of a sense, an intuitive sense about like what this is going to do to our industry, the technology industry, and the world kind of at large. At least we have an idea of what we think, right? Because we're in it all day, every day. And I search for analogies to think like, what is this analogous to? And it's actually hard to find something that this is comparative to, which makes it so that much more difficult to wrap your head around, right? We've built websites and web apps in this, or I should even say, like, not just talk about websites and web apps, but we have built a consumer technology, web-based consumer technology ecosystem that's predicated on this idea of trying to sort of split it down the middle, build big platforms that everybody comes to, and it's sort of averaged out in the middle. It's kind of what most people need who use it, but it's not quite right for everybody, right? But you sort of have these big hubs, right? This is how we ended up with the FANGs, big hubs where everybody comes to. And it's interesting to think that AI, and oh boy, if you think about it, this is actually the continuation of the blockchain story part 2, is mass decentralization of that, right? Where we don't need millions of people going to one door now anymore and walking in the same building. There are now a million different doors, right? And each different door is a different little instantiation of that product, that thing that I'm using, as opposed to this kind of clearinghouse type of mentality that I think we have right now with regards to what we use online. It's going to change a lot about how we interact with products.
Well, so I think we all agree from a business perspective, the riches are in niches, and this just allows you to create software cheap enough so that you can serve a niche just as well as you could if you were a bigger company in the past. And I think that's actually super interesting. But it kind of reminds me, probably to wrap up this session, is that Moore's law, right, was about the doubling of computer chips, the number
Yep.
of transistors on a chip. And there was another law, and I can't think of the name of it, that basically said that software has continued to slow down so much that the increase in the quality of the hardware doesn't matter. And then we joke about, Slack taking so much more computing processing than the ability to go to the moon, and run slower than the whole spaceship, right? Like it's crazy. Software has gotten exponentially less productive from engineering, from like a quality perspective. But that's because we've created these layers of abstraction over software that make it easier to build really good software. And what I think is going to be interesting is the hardware space right now is really the limiter on AI.
Mm-hmm.
The hardware is the limiter on AI. Like that is 100% the case.
Yep.
It'll be really, really fun to watch the hardware improve. And this circles back to Shawn and his use case. As the hardware improves, your ability to deploy more sensors improve. Your ability to capture clearer audio improves. Your ability to capture clearer video improves. Hardware is an issue. When I say hardware, I don't just mean chips. I mean like storage. If we recorded everything as a video instead of just audio, and we recorded everything in 1080 instead of lower fidelity, if you had audio and video for everything, now your ability to process things improves exponentially even further. So instead of just taking still pictures of crops every 15 seconds, whatever, I don't know what, if you, I'm just making this up, but if you took high 60 frames a second, 1080 quality video with audio, your ability to feed the AI would increase dramatically. But right now, the AI couldn't keep up with that. And so I actually think hardware is one of the most interesting things to think about over the next 5 or 10 years.
Yep.
If I have time for farming, we actually use hyperspectral cameras, multispectral. So we're pulling in multiple, not just visible light, RGB, but different light spectrums. That's so heavy, it's not possible for, like, drones are off limits for most farmers because you don't have the bandwidth. Like you can't scan a field and have to upload 50 gigs of data. Like that's not feasible. We need to move that processing all the way to the edge where we're getting most of the work done at the edge, where we have that compute and we're sending it up to mothership, for let's verify that we didn't miss anything. Let's go over the big model. So we're going to run the lightweight models there so we can get early detection, and we send the rest to the cloud. Without that, it's just impossible to digitize the farm effectively right now.
It's just every quantum leap forward in software pushes a quantum leap forward in hardware, which pushes a quantum leap forward in software. And it's a cycle. And I think the AI cycle right now is going to push for a quantum leap forward in hardware. But what hasn't happened in a while is a quantum leap forward in storage, because we're not talking about gigabytes or terabytes of data. Potentially now we're talking about petabytes of data for something like a farm, like Shawn was saying. If you had drones that were automated and that were actually circling your whole farm every single day and loading that data, your ability to actually make informed decisions is exponentially different. But nobody could do it today. And so it's so much fun.
I think that like storage, it's really fascinating, right? Because the glut of data, the amount of data exhaust in the world that we're trying to capture is insanely rich. And I mean, just like what you're talking about, multispectral cameras, like catching UV light, catching infrared light, those type of things, right? Which just represents so much of a larger packet of data that you have to stuff somewhere in order to work on it. And so I think that the places where you're going to see that technological improvement, Chris, I think are places like compression, data compression, data abstraction representation, where we say, well, when we capture this data, do we need all of it, or can we transform the ETL pipeline where we can transform this data so that we can store it in an abbreviated or compressed way, but still get an accurate enough representation of the set in order to make the correct decisions? And strategies for managing data ingestion, data sunsetting, how data lifecycle works. One of the things we've gotten used to, actually, and this is what I think comes up to what you're talking about, Chris, is that we've gotten used to, in a world of the cloud storage, the sort of thinking of storage as like infinite now. It's like, big deal, throw up an S3 bucket and dump whatever the fuck you want into it, because who cares? There's like, it doesn't cost it costs $0 to store a terabyte of data, right? I mean, in something. So it's very, 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 very quick and fast. The problem with that is that we're going to just store more and more data, and eventually it's going to mean like the slowdown goes to a different area on the factory floor. Right. And so now the throughput of getting it in and getting it out, like you said, pushing things to the edge and that kind of thing, are where now the software has to respond and the hardware has to respond in order to kind of like adapt to this. It's really fascinating to see that push and pull happening like that.
I'll end my portion with the story about the pipeline. So you talked about, hey, there's a slowdown somewhere. If you don't know, Amazon actually physically has a truck they will send to your building to take your storage and then bring it physically to S3, because the pipeline isn't fast enough if you have enough data. At one point in time, we needed to spin up a secondary site or tertiary site, I don't remember. And we could not physically move the data in the cloud fast enough for it to ever catch up. So we had to create a copy physically and take a truck and put it in a truck and drive it to the secondary data center. And we had to do calculations on how long it would take to get there and how long it would take to set up, because we weren't sure if it took too long, if we would ever be able to catch up on the changes from when we stored the data to when we set up the data. There is real issues with internet pipelines with moving really big data. And yes, Netflix is, everybody streams now. Streaming is probably 70% of internet traffic, I think is what I heard. The reality is that's still not nearly as much as some of the data that gets is necessary to make things work. The joke was, when I was in my MBA a long time ago, was that at that point in time, people didn't realize this. Walmart had more data than the internet, right? Walmart internally had more data than the whole of the internet because of the sheer volume of data with their logistics. And then fast forward a few years later, at that point in time, Facebook as a company had 50% of all photos taken on their platform. And you say, how is that possible? Well, it's because all previous generations took less photos than modern generations. And then for every photo taken, Facebook had 12 different permutations saved in 12 different resolutions. And so it's an explosion, as you said, in terms of the volume of data. And so I'm sure it's not true anymore because Facebook's falling out of fashion and there's 1,000 other platforms. But the idea about the sheer volume of data, it's going to be an explosion. On that note, Shawn, do you have anything you would like to close out with today?
Maybe just a reflection that we're entering this is kind of my view of it. We're entering a knowledge age. So we've gone through the industrial age, the computing age, the information age. So connecting the bits to the data, to making it information. And we had the internet age is kind of rolled up in it. And now we're reaching the knowledge age where we're actually assembling the information in coherent ways that we can use it. And this is going to go on. This is just at the very beginning of this. And what AI is going to take us is through the knowledge age. And eventually, I believe it's the human augmented knowledge age. I intend to augment my own intelligence with computers.
Amen to
Really
that.
exciting time to be alive and to be working.
It is. It's the best time.
Without
This
a
is
doubt.
absolutely the best time.
Yes.
Justin, do you have anything you want to end with?
I think I'm good. This has been a great conversation, Shawn. Thanks for jumping on and chatting with us.
Yep.
All
No
right,
problem.
let me stop recording.